As Americans, we cannot allow this to continue. It is time to liberate our communities from this scourge of drug addiction.
20 pounds of heroin found behind the walls of a judge's suburban home. This wasn't a cartel hideout. This was the collapse of integrity behind a courtroom door. This wasn't corruption from the outside. It was rotted from within, signed, sealed, and protected by a man in robes. Don't leave. What comes next is the part they tried to bury. And if you believe justice must be on the side of the people, like this video.
Well, welcome back. The Trump administration, in a memo to Congress yesterday, said that the U.S. now is engaged in a formal, quote, armed conflict with terrorist drug cartels.
At 5:42 a.m., the streets of Cobb County, Georgia, were still quiet. The kind of quiet that hides a storm. The hallway lights flickered once, then boots hit the floor. FBI and ICE tactical teams moved through Judge Marcus Hale's home like a shadow cutting through glass. No shouts, no warnings, only the sound of precision, the weight of men who already knew what they were about to find. A steel door broke under the battering ram. The echo rolled through the house like thunder. Family photos hung crooked on the walls. A smiling man beside the flag he'd sworn to defend. But trust had already rotted behind that smile. Behind a false wall, agents uncovered 20 pounds of heroin, stamped and stacked like warehouse stock, in a safe. $2.4 million in sealed cash. The basement was filled with tactical rifles and handguns. But the real betrayal wasn't the drugs or the guns. On Hale's unlocked phone, investigators found encrypted messages with Tendagua, a Venezuelan cartel figure feared even by his own men. Their conversations discussed shipment schedules, law enforcement delay strategies, and court rulings timed to open safe corridors for narcotics. This wasn't corruption, this was loyalty to the cartel against his own country. If you're still watching, you already know about how deep power can hide rot. Comment I see. If you understand that corruption doesn't start in the streets, it starts in the system. The deeper agents dug, the more the veneer of respectability crumbled. Judge Marcus Hale wasn't pressured by the cartel. He was part of it. He didn't just open doors, he built them. Financial analysts traced $41.7 million over 6 years, money laundered through 47 shell corporations in Delaware, Panama, and Curacao. These companies had no employees, no products, no operations. They existed for one purpose: to launder cartel profits through the legitimate U.S. financial system. The money flowed in a cold, calculated loop, sent from Venezuelan fronts disguised as consulting fees and funneled into Georgia companies chosen by Judge Hale. From the outside, it looked like a judge engaged in business investments. Inside the case files, it was a conveyor belt funneling blood money. A single message stunned investigators. Run 38 loads this quarter. Same route, no roadside interference. Each load was estimated at 50 to 120 pounds of narcotics. Nearly a ton of heroin and fentanyl moved through the Southeast in just 3 months, authorized by a judge sworn to uphold the law. Agents also uncovered coded calendar entries for lunch, golf, and review sessions with 12 county officials and 3 senior law enforcement officers. Bank records linked $8.3 million in bribes to those meetings, payment for silence, delay, and cleared corridors. The truth was no longer theoretical. This judge did not fail to protect justice. He engineered the pipeline poisoning American neighborhoods. If you think this post needs to go viral, like and comment justice to get the algorithm to push the video. Now it's time to see how the government fights back. When the truth of Judge Hale's role became undeniable, federal agencies shifted from investigation to interdiction. What had begun as a single house raid now expanded into Operation Crosscut, a coordinated federal strike designed to sever a cartel artery running through the American interior. At dawn on a Thursday morning, simultaneous warrants were executed across 7 states: Georgia, Florida, Texas, New Jersey, New York, Illinois, and Alabama. There was no warning. In Savannah, unmarked SUVs rolled quietly down a line of aging warehouses along the riverfront. The buildings appeared abandoned, but inside, agents discovered packaging equipment, chemical residue, and shipment logs tied to incoming containers from Puerto Cabello, Venezuela. When tactical units breached the side entrance, shouting echoed off corrugated steel. Suspects attempted to flee toward the loading docks, but drones overhead locked the perimeter. Within minutes, the building was secured. In Houston, a leased industrial park suite served as a conversion and repackaging point. The lights were still on when the agents arrived. Two armed guards at the rear exit attempted to escape across a gravel access road, but K-9 units intercepted them. Inside, investigators found barrels of precursor chemicals, sealed plastic drums, and scales coated in residue. The air carried the unmistakable sting of manufacturing toxicity. But the largest confrontation unfolded in central New Jersey, where cartel-linked brokers operated out of a trucking distribution hub. As federal teams approached, several workers dropped their clipboards and ran between rows of freight trailers. Agents pursued through narrow lanes of steel and diesel haze. Shouts, the thud of boots, the metal clang of trailer doors slammed shut. It was a scene of controlled chaos. One suspect attempted to hide inside a refrigerated unit, but was located within minutes by thermal imaging. Across all 7 sites, the seizures mounted with stark clarity. 1.8 metric tons of narcotics, including fentanyl, heroin, and methamphetamine derivatives, 312 firearms recovered, many with obliterated serials, approximately $142 million in cash, gold, and convertible securities ledgers, naming 21 municipal and law enforcement officials on the cartel's payroll. But the most startling discovery came not from drugs or weapons, but from the paperwork. Inside a locked office in Newark, agents found a filing cabinet containing monthly payment schedules, carefully organized sheets listing transfers, drop instructions, and coded references to officials across multiple counties. On one page, written in clean block letters, was a note that investigators would later testify as critical. Hale guarantees clearance. Do not deviate. The public reaction was immediate and explosive. These were not street traffickers or anonymous smugglers. These were administrators, officers, inspectors, and brokers, people embedded directly into the machinery of daily civic life. Communities awoke to news helicopters over industrial zones, flashing lights outside government buildings, and press briefings that spoke of systemic infiltration, not isolated wrongdoing. What Operation Crosscut exposed was not just a drug pipeline, but a network of access, a system where influence and bureaucracy had been weaponized to move narcotics across a nation under the cover of legality. The shock was not simply that the cartel had reached American soil, it was that the cartel had been invited in. The aftermath of Operation Crosscut did not settle into silence. It detonated outward. As federal teams processed evidence from the raids, a clearer picture of the internal rot began to surface. What had first appeared to be a judge acting alone was now revealed as a web of reciprocal favors, quiet handshakes, and transactions disguised as routine administrative approvals. The corruption did not live at the margins of local government. It was threaded directly through it. Investigators uncovered bank ledgers, email threads, and encrypted note apps documenting years of exchanges between cartel intermediaries and municipal officials across multiple counties. Some records were almost brazen. A sheriff's deputy in Fulton County received recurring transfers labeled as security consulting. A zoning commissioner in Jacksonville received wire deposits corresponding exactly to the approval of riverfront warehouse leases. A procurement officer in Chicago submitted unusually urgent paperwork for import inspection waivers that aligned, down to the hour, with cartel shipment schedules. The numbers told a story impossible to ignore. $8.3 million in bribe and facilitation payments traced over a 5-year span. 12 sworn police officers under internal investigation. 3 municipal contractors implicated as logistical intermediaries. Multiple court filings flagged for irregular case dismissals connected to cartel-linked defendants. The betrayal was not just in the money, it was in the deliberate protection of the network. Officials tasked with upholding the law had instead been clearing pathways for drugs to flow through neighborhoods, schools, and hospitals. They had enabled the violence and addiction that followed. Public reaction was swift and fractured. Outside the courthouse in Atlanta, citizens gathered holding signs reading, "If the law is criminal, what justice remains?" and "Who were we trusting?" Some were furious, demanding resignations and criminal prosecution. Others were stunned into silence, struggling to reconcile the image of polished public servants with the stark facts now emerging in federal affidavits. Inside government buildings, the fallout was immediate and tangible. 2 county sheriffs submitted forced resignations pending inquiry. A city council chamber in Savannah convened an emergency closed-door session that lasted nearly 9 hours. A police union in New Jersey issued a statement distancing itself from implicated officers, calling the scandal a systemic breach of oath. But there was also resistance, quiet, defensive, and tense. Some officials accused federal agencies of overreach. Others questioned the timing. Press conferences became arenas for political theater, with microphones cutting between outrage, denial, and reluctant acknowledgement. Meanwhile, FBI analysts continued to map the relationships, each line of connection forming a lattice of complicity that reached further than anyone had anticipated. And at the center of this structure stood the original figure, Judge Marcus Hale, now held without bail, facing multiple federal charges. When led past reporters, he did not shout, deny, or protest. He simply looked downward, his silence speaking more clearly than any statement. The realization settled over the country with a cold weight. This was not a story about a single corrupted man. It was the unveiling of how deeply a cartel can root itself into the institutions meant to stop it. By the end of the week, the federal situation rooms were no longer walls of speculation. They were tables of evidence. What began as a single residential raid had grown into one of the most consequential narcotics corruption cases in recent state history. The numbers were not just statistics, they were the outline of a machine. In total, investigators cataloged 1.809 metric tons of narcotics seized across all connected sites, an amount capable of flooding entire metropolitan regions for months. Alongside the drugs came $144.4 million in combined financial seizures, cash recovered in duffel bags and safes, bank accounts frozen mid-transfer, holdings in commodities markets halted on court order, and 120 gold bars logged and locked into federal storage. The weapons count reached 324 across raids, handguns, rifles, and tactical configurations, each tagged and photographed under fluorescent light. But the most consequential inventory was not physical. It was the names. Names in ledger books, internal emails, encrypted chats, burner phone contacts, municipal schedules. Each one represented a junction point where legality had been breached and loyalty sold. Federal prosecutors prepared indictments for 184 individuals, not only traffickers and brokers, but law enforcement officers, city employees, and administrative officials who had knowingly assisted or protected the network. Some of those arrested broke quickly, offering statements in exchange for leniency. Others refused to speak at all. A few continued to insist on innocence, claiming coincidence, ignorance, or clerical error. Yet the documentation was too consistent, the patterns too direct. The corruption did not hide in shadows. It was papered, logged, time-stamped, and routed. Communities across the affected states reacted with a mix of disbelief and recognition. In certain neighborhoods, the news confirmed what residents had long suspected, that something powerful and unseen had been steering the flow of drugs and violence. In others, the shock was severe. Teachers, church leaders, office workers, people who had once shaken hands with the implicated, now questioned how deeply the betrayal ran. For local governments, the consequences were immediate. Vacant offices, paused court proceedings, emergency special elections, internal audits. Agencies attempting to rebuild trust in real time while acknowledging that the damage was not incidental. It was structural. Federal officials maintained a measured tone. They emphasized that the case was not an endpoint but a pivot, a dismantling of one network to expose others. The investigation, they warned, would continue for months, possibly years. At the center of the story, Judge Marcus Hale remained held under federal watch. His courtroom now stood empty, the bench polished, the flags undisturbed, the nameplate unmoved. It looked unchanged, until one knew what had been happening behind its authority. The case left the public with a single, stark understanding. Drugs do not simply arrive in a city. They travel through systems. Systems built, managed, and protected by people in positions of trust. And when trust is compromised, the damage does not begin with the drugs. It begins where the law itself bends. In stories like this, it's easy to point to the drugs, the guns, the money, the tangible evidence of crime. But what this case revealed was something far more dangerous, the quiet collapse of integrity. Because when the law itself becomes the gateway, when the judge holds the door open, when the system built to protect the innocent becomes the shield of the guilty, the harm spreads deeper than any shipment ever could. It wasn't just heroin hidden behind a wall. It was trust, broken, packaged, and sold. And that is the real cost, not measured in pounds or dollars, but in faith. Communities rely on courts, officers, agencies, and institutions to stand as the line between order and chaos. When those guardians turn, the damage doesn't just stain records, it shapes futures. Addiction spreads, violence follows, families fall apart, neighborhoods lose safety, and people begin to believe that justice is not real. Only influence is. But this case also showed something else. When the system breaks, there are still people willing to drag truth into the light. Agents who move before dawn. Analysts who trace every dollar. Communities who refuse to stay silent. Corruption thrives where the public looks away. But accountability grows when people choose to see. So if you are here, still watching, still listening, you are part of the side that pays attention. Comment "I see" if you refuse to ignore what others pretend not to notice. Comment "Justice" if you believe accountability must reach every level, even the highest. And share this video, because silence is where corruption survives, but exposure is where it ends. Your voice is part of this fight. Let it be heard.